All right, welcome to the channel, and today we'll be talking about the Meze Lyric 2. And these were sent out by Meze as a demo unit, but fun fact was that my buddy actually sent me one as well earlier. So I actually have two here on hand, and that's kind of a fun comparison because some people were saying that the Lyric 2 has some unit variation. And just to kind of get that out of the way real quick regarding the Lyric 2, in my testing with both of these, they really didn't have too much unit variation for my, or at least between these two specific units. And so to take that into account, I tested them off of a whole bunch of amps and DACs, and that's where most of the differences I noticed came into play, and both behaved very similarly, if not the same, across the board of the different amps and DACs that I was trying. But let's start with build and aesthetic, because that's the normal thing that we do on this channel. So build, once again, I've had a bunch of Meze stuff come through recently, and actually I have another one that I'll be doing something on here probably in April. So be prepared for that and wait for that to come out or what have you. Yeah. Words. So, but build and aesthetic. It's a Meze product, so build is going to be stupid good. It's, got everything you can want as far as quality of materials and polish, and just everything about what they put together is just like seriously luxury, next level kind of stuff. The always favorite magnetic pads, and the just kind of pop right on, which is fantastic. Pads are very cushy and easy to go along with. The overall movement of the materials and how they interact with each other is very smooth, and nothing catches, nothing is egregious or anything or annoying in any way, shape, or form. But actually, before I go and to the next thing, one of the things going into comfort I did notice with the Lyric 2 and some of the other Mezes, but specifically Lyric 2, as you can kind of see here, it's a very specific kind of shape to it, and it's very springy. And so with that comes this, how to put it? So when you put them on your head, it kind of feels like a little kid is trying to squish your head with pillows, like with all their might, but they're just not that strong. So take that into account. And another factor is because the way these swivel, and that the way that they're kind of the way the pad sits, they kind of automatically will have like this, they sit kind of weird. And that how it you see, if you look when I did that, if you kind of just move a little bit, it'll start to like just automatically kind of pull and go do that direction and kind of swivel that way automatically. Great, I have a beanie on, so take that into a consideration. But putting it back on like this, and I noticed, like, if you're not careful with them, like, they hold on pretty good, but they're not the most, like, these are falling off right now, and they're yep. So you just have to be careful with that and pay attention to how you put them on your head, and make sure that you have them fitted just right, and kind of you have to use kind of lean the headband a little bit further back than you'd expect, and they kind of the cups themselves kind of shuffle a little bit more forward, and you can kind of see there they kind of go there. And for me, that's been the sweet spot. I'm probably talking loud because these are very good at isolation. But the other thing is the cups themselves are fairly narrow, so your ears, they kind of, for me, I don't have the biggest ears, but they do kind of cup your ears very well. And to me, I actually almost felt like I was scooping behind my ear a little bit when I put them on to get them to fit in there. And they're comfortable. I didn't have any major issues. And sometimes when cups do that, like the ear cups do that, they'll rub on my ear. And after a while, they get annoying and painful or what have you. But I didn't have that issue with the Lyric 2. So just something to be aware of. If you do have bigger ears, these are not the largest cups. They are deep, fairly deep, but as far as narrowness, they're narrow. End of the day. But back to the overall aesthetic, it's fantastic. I love the new wood design that they have here, and they maintain the kind of copper look with the black. But overall, the build and aesthetic is just fantastic, and don't really have much more to say regarding the build and aesthetic. So going into the sound of the Meze Lyric 2, I basically paired this with a bunch of different amps and DACs, and I noticed that it really has some crazy interactions for me, at least, in the sense, and crazy is a strong word, probably not crazy, but it definitely has, to my ears, specific things depending on what you're looking for. I noticed it with ESS DAC, so I paired it with my Pietus, Maximus Pietus. God, I can never get that right. Maximus Pietus from Niche, and that has an ESS DAC chip in it from Shit. So not my favorite. Like that DAC chip really brought forward what this has in its strength. It really just highlighted it even more, and it just became a little just. It wasn't glaring or bright or anything like that. It just got a little bit too sharp, I guess maybe would be the right words, but it wasn't bad. It just wasn't my favorite sound out of it. And which is funny because usually that combo on the Pietus is Maximus Pietus is that it's actually I love it with most of my other headphones. But with the Lyric 2, it got just a little bit too not my favorite. I don't know how to put it into words. It wasn't overly bright or anything like that. It just became very crisp, and it was leaning a little bright, I will say that, but it wasn't like something that was like egregious. It wasn't something that was bothersome or that I had to like not listen to. It was just enough to where I just was like, not my favorite thing. And then I paired it with my Cord TT2, and that was by far my favorite DAC pairing. My favorite amp was my ECP T4, which is I don't really like talking about that amp because it's almost impossible to get, and it just feels weird to use that one, but that's the one I had on hand that was easy and readily available, so I paired it with that, and that was my favorite amp pairing with the Lyric 2. It just really warmed up the mids and the upper mids and vocals. The low end got a little more elevated, and I mean the highs are very controlled on these. So the highs across the board were extremely tame. I think the biggest strength across the board as well was the upper mids, and the vocals are very forward. It's a very upper mid range and vocal forward headphone to what I was listening and how I heard it. So take that into account. And then across the board, the lows are, I don't want to say dampened, but they're just kind of pulled back, and they have a nice percussion to them or a nice punch to them, but they're just not the forefront. They're not like even on par with the other things. I would say this is a very, like I said, upper mid-range and vocals forward sounding headphone, and not a bad thing. It's actually quite easy to get along with. It's very, I was calling it mellow, yet like a detailed mellow listen. Like it's an easy listening, just in detail. Like you can pick all the details out without them being overly like bright or sharp. So anyways, back to the different pairings. I also like currently I have it paired with my Whammy, my DIY Whammy case. DIY Whammy headphone amplifier, and that's paired with my Cord TT2, and that was my favorite solid state, but it was on par with when I paired the Maximus Pietus with the Cord TT2 as the DAC for both. It's actually right on par. They're actually both. I'd say the Whammy has a little bit more brightness. It does bring forward a little more brightness and crispness to the signature or sound of the Lyric 2, whereas the Maximus Pietus has a little more warmth. I guess it does elevate a little bit more of that low end, but it's just and a little more punchiness, but I'd say mostly just it has a little more warmth and a little less sharpness and a little more tame across the board. So those were kind of the different amp and DAC pairings I was generally listening with the Lyric 2, and also the Cord TT2. Sorry, the Cord TT2 as a standalone amp DAC combo was also really top notch. It was right there as far as the rest of them. I really enjoyed that one as well, but my definitive favorite was probably not probably, I know it was the ECP T4 with the Cord TT2 is my favorite overall. That's a tube hybrid amp. As far as solid state favorites, all three were excellent. They just did variances of each other. I'd say the Cord TT2 brought out even more of that just smoothness and warmth that the Maximus Pietus has, and just elevated it a little bit more, whereas the DIY Whammy headphone amplifier brought out a little more of the forwardness in the highs and the upper mids, and the vocals got a little more sharp and bright. So that's kind of the overall signatures I was getting from this. And when I paired them across with each of the different headphones as far as unit variants, I didn't notice any major difference outside of the synergies between the different amps and DACs. And so each headphone to my ear sounded exactly the same. I didn't really notice any difference, but I did definitely notice how drastically these changed their sound signature, depending most specifically regarding the DAC that I was using, and then also the amp was also it definitely changed with the amp as well. But the overall, I would say you really need to find something that synergizes with what your preferences are. And so if you like a more brighter signature, try to find something that's a little more bright, especially like a DAC that will actually play into the strengths of this. Or if you want more warm signature, go for like an R2R or something along those lines, and then get something with a little more warm, like maybe a warmer tube amp or a tube hybrid, and then these pair quite excellently with that. So you want to kind of find the synergy, because these do change their sound, not drastically, but enough that it's very evident that they're changing the sound signature based on the amp and DAC or your chain that you're using. Going from that, we'll talk about the different songs. I'll give you guys a couple tracks I was listening to. So starting off, we had the Menahan Street Band, and the track I'm going to list, and I'll put it down below. It's just my quick little notes. But it was Menahan Street Band, and the track I used was Make the Road by Walking. And the things to kind of pay attention to with this are the details, imaging, and the stage. The stage across the board with these is not the best. It's a very here, like it's just around the head, but the imaging is excellent. Like you can definitely pick up the different where it's coming from, and the details and the separation and everything is really nice. It's actually excellent across the details and imaging is what I wrote down in my notes. Things to pay attention to as well are the triangle tones at the 2 minute and 17-second marker in this track. You'll hear like the instrument's like a triangle, and they ding ding ding, has a very ding ding sound. So with that one, then I'm moving on to the next one. Was the artist is BJ the Chicago Kid, and the track is Turning Me Up. And the things that I really enjoyed with this is this one's actually a vocal one. The Menahan Street Band was not vocals, it's just all instruments, so something to be aware of. The Turning Me Up, though, the things I focused on was the upper mids and the vocals. It was very nice. It helped, like, kind of showed where these shine, because that's, to me, is the biggest strength the Lyric 2s have, is their upper mid-range and vocals seem to be like that's the most forward anyways. That's the thing that kind of stands out the most to me throughout my listening experience. Just fun to listen to track. And it's also something that you can kind of see with this one as well, where the lows aren't quite as boomy or slappy that I'd prefer to have a little more low end with my closebacks especially, but these ones are very tame and they're very pulled back. They're punchy, but they're just not like in your face, and they're not something that I would expect a little bit more, or not expect, I would personally like a little bit more. But that being said, things to pay attention to are the percussions, the shaker that's in this track. You can hear it throughout, and it's just, that's the things that stand out very prominently with the Lyric 2s, like obviously the vocals. So going on to the third and final track that I'm going to list, it's the band is Deer Tick, and the song is Baltimore Blues #1. This one, actually was really digging on this track recently when I was listening to it again. Anyways, the things you want to listen for while listening to this track is, with the Lyric 2 specifically, it tames the highs like a lot. Like there's a lot of electric guitar, there's a lot of like high notes and high tones, and the vocals are relatively high. The electric guitar, you want to pay attention to how like the playing, the strumming of it, and like the different instruments there, and just paying attention to the upper mids, vocals, and the highs. And it definitely plays those strengths. And then it kind of goes into the thing about the Lyric 2, which I'll probably have B-roll for this, but it has this QWRM is the thing for the Lyric 2, and it's supposed to tame the highs, and to my ears it definitively does that. So with all these tracks you can kind of pick that up, like any of the highs, any of the things that you would expect, or you play something that has like a known sibilance, or like a super high, like hi-hats or high tones, it definitely tames them. Moving on from that, let's talk about who this is for and my overall thoughts and experience with it in general. Once again, it's a Meze product, so it's a luxury item. Their top of the line stuff is always going to be more on that luxury side, and the build and the quality of materials and overall comfort and just sound signature is going to be that luxury kind of price point and use case. So who is this mostly for? Someone that's wants that high-end sound and luxury good and want something that's built fantastic, probably that. I wouldn't say this is a college kid headphone by any means, or a struggling artist kind of headphone. This is definitely something more in the lines of audiophile, well established, and they know what they're looking for. They want a very tamed highs with a very, forward mids and upper mids, and that's what they want to focus on. This does excellent with more of that classical sounds or blues or jazz, big band type stuff. I'd say I preferred mostly the kind of the Menahan Street Band kind of stuff, whereas mostly this like bluesy, jazzy fusion type of thing, or lots of instrumentals. I was really digging these a lot with that kind of genre. So anyone that likes those kind of things, mostly like the blues, jazz, these definitely shine a lot. Going into my final thoughts, man, I for me, they're not really for me. Like as far as like what I prefer overall, I think these are excellent headphones. They sound really well done, really well done. These sound excellent. They're just the sound signature is not necessarily my preferred signature, but what it does excellently. Like there's excellent imaging, excellent detail. The tonal balance is very nice. The overall feel and build and listening to them is very enjoyable. I'd say the only one concern I had was sometimes, like I said, like when you put them on, like they have this tendency to want to like flip forward if you're like moving around a lot, which most people aren't. But when I'm writing my notes and I'm trying to like look down to write my notes, or stuff, it was becoming a problem where it kind of start to fall off my head a little bit. And the other thing was that slight, it is a very tight headphone, but it's so cushy that it's not really that noticeable. It does feel like a very, very weak child with pillows is trying to crush your head a little bit, but it's more of a funny thing than a annoyance or kind of a uncomfortable thing, at least for me. So overall, it's a recommendation if it fits with what your preferences are in regards to like that tamed highs and more of that mid focus and vocal focus. And if you listen to mostly kind of like instrumentals, blues or jazz, I'd say these are quite excellent, to be honest. And if you listen to a lot of hip hop, I mean, they're good for the vocals part of it, but they're not really, the low end just doesn't hit the way I'd want it to. And regarding, I mean, I was listening to some country stuff too randomly, and like that Deer Tick track or like some like bluegrass or stuff along those lines. It does pretty good with that. Even some rock and roll, it does pretty good, but it's still missing that low end, just like kick to the head. And I would prefer to have a little bit more of that. But yeah, overall, excellent headphone, and I can easily recommend it if it's within your budget and you're looking for, like I said, those mid forward kind of a sound with a very tame highs and, not the most forward or punchy bass. So, yeah, with that, I think I've been talking a little bit too much, but excellent headphone. They are beautiful and they sound very good for what they do, and they are excellent in those regards. So, yeah, cheers, and I hope everyone has a great morning, afternoon, or evening, and we'll catch you guys on the next one, and gals.